You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. I frequently have guests on the show who surprise me with how their customer experience career started. Today's guest fits that bill. I bet you don't look to those with a chemistry degree as the typical customer experience entry path. Yet that's exactly what Karl Sharicz, founder and president of HorizonCX, earned to launch his CX career, albeit in a very non-linear sort of way. Describing himself as a recovering corporate guy, Karl lived and now understands what it takes for a company to get started in focusing on customer experience and creating something great for the customer. That chemistry launch? Well, it proves the point that every industry has a customer. Working with complex commercial machines designed to analyze chemical compounds, Karl helped the users of those machines, the customers, understand how to use it and accomplish their needs. Essentially, B2B customer success before we even knew what customer success was. Having come out of that corporate world, Karl knows that not every company is at step 100 in their customer journey. His company, HorizonCX, helps small and medium-sized businesses to get started, to understand the basics of customer experience. That's something I think most CX Passport listeners know is sorely needed in the business world right now. I am eager to learn more. Karl, welcome to CX Passport.
Thank you, Rick. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Let's have some fun here. I know you're enjoying a what I would assume is a beautiful New England afternoon. I've got my Texas afternoon going here. Let's have some fun today, right?
Oh, you got that right. 67 degrees here in this beautiful, warm New England afternoon. Love it.
I may end the podcast right now because it's 94 degrees in Texas, but we're not going to end it. We're going to talk about customer experience and we're going to have some fun with it. So I want to start with the basics. Lots of folks talk about customer experience, maturity step 9, step 50, step 100, but so many just simply aren't there yet. What are these basics, the fundamentals of customer experience that a company needs to get started?
Well, that's really a good place to start, Rick. And I'm going to give it to you, if you will, in the context of the work that I do, because I train.
Sounds good to me.
Fundamentals of customer experience. So let's start here. Organizational leaders need to accept the fact that it's all about the customer.
Yeah.
And the customer is important. Now, I know that sounds cliche, right? But I think we miss that, or at least leaders tend to miss that because they're so defocused. They're focused on so many other things. So, for example, profit and growth. That's the direct result of customers being satisfied and being loyal to an organization, let alone then advocating for that organization. And I think, I say that in the context of there's this thing called the service profit chain that was written about by James Heskett back in 1997, as a matter of fact. That's 25 years ago. And
we don't want to talk about those timelines, Karl. Come on now.
But I mean, it's just as relevant today as it was back then. And I'm surprised that it takes so much convincing for leadership in organizations to kind of realize that. But whereas I'm teaching the basics of customer experience mostly to the CX practitioner, I'm going to kind of keep it at that level for the moment because I know we can talk about the other stuff. And realizing where that customer fits within the service profit chain. That's a 7-step model, and it ends with revenues and profitability, but it starts with internal service quality and hiring the right people with the right skills or training them to have the skills that are necessary. But in an organization, someone's got to lead the charge. And so, you historically have somebody in the marketing group that was given a responsibility. Hey, you. Please, I want you, in addition to what your regular job is, I want you to focus on customer experience. Someone has to lead that charge. So assume somebody's in there to do that. You have to have initially a good sense of where you are in terms of maturity. And now you mentioned maturity, maturity step 0 all the way through step 100. But you really need to know where you are as a starting point. Because there's no sense that you'll never be able to figure out if you're making progress unless you know where your starting point is, right? There was a quote, and I always like to use this when it came out of Bain some years ago, and it went like this: 80% of business leaders believe their organization delivers a superior customer experience. It was research that they'd done, and they went out and they asked the customers of these organizations to what extent they felt they were receiving this superior customer experience.
Yeah.
And it turns out that 8% of them believed they were. So they have this huge gap. So there's language I think that some senior leaders will understand.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that, because that actually, something you said there triggers a question for me, Karl, and it was when you talked about it going back to 1997, right? We're talking about things that are when you and I don't want to talk about our careers beginning, but back in those kind of days, right?
Yep.
And when you talk about that massive disconnect between 80% saying that they're delivering great experience and then the actual perception of that great experience is 8%.
Yeah.
So with all this awareness, with all this lip service that's paid to customer experience, these people are saying your customer experience, your customer service, everything is awful. If there's so much of this awareness, if there's so much of this sense that customer experience is important, why are companies getting this wrong?
That's a really second good question you're asking. I think it's a general lack of understanding. I mean, one of the first things we talk about in the course is what is customer experience? And it really needs to be an overall part of the company strategy. But then that means that somebody who is sitting there in really working on customer strategy has to have that kind of input. And I'm not sure it's being delivered there. And I think a lot of organizations are built around product, and they're built around expecting instant results.
Okay.
And I've said it many, many times, CX is it's the long haul. It's not the shortcut to success. I give you an example, if I may, and I won't mention the name of the company that I used to work for.
That's good.
Anybody that knows me can probably figure that out. But the organization at one point in time decided Six Sigma was going to solve all of our problems.
Of course.
So we want to go Six Sigma. So what they did was they hired a company, a consultant, to come in there and just enlighten everybody with Six Sigma. And their one objective with Six Sigma was to remove cost. Mm-hmm. I think there's just, way too much attention and focus on the revenue and profitability part of that service profit chain.
Yeah.
And it's a failing to understand the dependencies that revenues and profitability come from. It comes from the customer, but it also, before that, it comes from the employee.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
You talked about that cost cutting, and that's something that's hit me kind of in the heart a little bit. And a lot of us in the customer experience world talk about this a lot. And one example that gets brought up all the time, and I don't even like this term, but call deflection. And I've actually talked with people who are like, I refuse to use the term call deflection because I don't want to deflect anything. I just want to provide the best option for the customer. If they want self-service, great. If they want a human, great. But there's so much of that, because it's cheaper, let's go down that path, choice when it comes to customer experience. And we're hearing, I'm seeing plenty of chatter about it on LinkedIn, but forget LinkedIn, just amongst our friends, our peers, they're saying that customer service is just so toxic these days. I'm going to ask you a very similar question. Why are companies blowing off customer service? Maybe it is just that cost thing, but what's going to happen if that's all they do is the cost focus and get rid of their approach to customer service?
Well, it's another good question, because service is really delivered by frontline people.
Amen. Oh my gosh,
they
amen.
Are the ones, they're on the line. And I'll say, in most cases, even in my experience, when I get to that real person, they want to do a good job. They all want to do a good job, but they may be constrained by whatever systems they have, the tools that they have in order to help them be successful. Hiring the right employees to begin with is critical. and in being onboarded in the right way and trained properly to deliver that value. So that's what's really the customer. They're the face of, we hear a lot of these days about artificial intelligence. And I got to say, it's a tool. It's supposed to address getting customers to get their answers and issues dealt with more efficiently and quickly. But there are so many failures in regard to that, whether it's the technology itself, whether it's not the right technology, or it's a misapplied technology, but it ends up frustrating people. By the time you get to a real person as a customer, you're ready to probably bite that person's head off, and they didn't deserve that because It wasn't their issue. But I mean, you're dealing with a bot before you get there.
You said something that there's a lot that's woven in there that I'd want to unpack a little bit, and that is first of all, just starting off with the idea that the front line is where that is delivered, and that they're not equipped with the best tools, and they're not always right. There are great experiences out there. You and I live in a business where we're trying to improve customer experience, so we focus on where it's broken. There's plenty of cases where it's actually working really, really well. But so are they equipped to be able to do it? The humans themselves may want to be doing it. You talked about hiring the right people so that they have the heart for it. I want to talk a little bit about the bot aspect of it, because I want to make sure that, at least for me, I'm not anti-technology at all. I'll give you an example. I hate calling to make restaurant reservations. And I realize that sentence is even shocking to some that, wait, Rick, you even call? Just yesterday, there's a restaurant that I want to go to in Scottsdale, Arizona. We're visiting my son out in Tempe, and you can't book it online. And it's maddening. We like the place, so we're going to do it. But that alone is making me not want to choose that company because they don't have a technology solution for a particular customer service element that I want. But there are plenty of other cases when I want to change a complex flight arrangement, or when I want to deal with something and it's complex or it's financial. I want to talk to a human and not wait 4 hours to do it. And why do you think that companies have just driven so hard towards that digital? Is it just simply cost, Karl? Is it they forgot all these basics that you're hoping to bring into this? Why is it that we're just so hard charging towards that solution at the exclusion of everything else?
Yeah, I think it's a cost factor too, and the fact that they're being sold, AI is being sold that you can do this with less people.
I know.
It should be, in theory, the easier questions to answer should be handled by a bot, should be easily handled. If I want directions to a restaurant location or something like that, that should be easily done.
Well, so Karl, we'll talk about this a little bit more in context of HorizonCX, but just in general, what do you think it's going to take to get leaders to care about this? And I realize that's such woe is me, leaders don't care. It's kind of blaming others. But a lot of that is driven by a leadership that says 80% say they're delivering great customer experience, and as contrasted with the 8% of customers who say that they actually are. What's it going to take to get them to care?
You would think that quote would help.
Yeah, you want to think.
Here the customer is giving you the answer to the question.
Customer's giving you the middle finger.
You believe 80%. You got to have language that leadership understands, and that's dollars and cents, Okay. And customer data, if it's done right, if it's obtained correctly, will provide the evidence that leadership can respond to. But CX leaders, on the other hand, have a responsibility for connecting those dots for organizational leadership. You got to have the forum. You got to be able to have a seat at the table, but you got to connect the dots for them. It's amazing how hard it is to get senior leadership to even understand something like the service profit chain that frontline people have absolutely no problem with understanding. It's crystal clear to them, but it isn't for leadership. So, I guess the bottom line is we need to get beyond this numbers aspect.
Amen.
Anybody in NPS house will say, oh yeah, I got to share this with you. I got an email last week, and the email title was, "Everybody wants an NPS above 80, right?"
Oh, gosh. And
I almost fell over, and of course it grabbed my attention, and I opened the email.
So it worked, I guess.
I wanted to see what it was all about. And then the second line was, "And everybody wants a response rate above 98%. And I'm like, oh no, who's promulgating this fiction over here? And it's a vendor. And it really disappointed me that it was a vendor.
The score part, Karl, that's the part. And I've got my little pithy phrase that I say: stop surveying scores, start listen and act. And it is exactly that. It's irrelevant. The score, I don't care if you're 80 or negative 80, as long as you know why you're what that number is and then do something about it. That's the important part.
I think, I'm going to sound a bit Pollyannish here for a moment here, but leaders need to fundamentally care about employees first and foremost, and reward them fairly and equitably, and treat them for the critical role that they serve, which is they represent the voice of the customer.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is, it goes without saying, the customer is the only reason organizations exist. And no organization is immune from failing. We've seen example after example of that. And I used to say, except for the government, but I'm having my doubts about that these days.
Come on now. I've done a really good job. You're about episode 87 of keeping politics out of this. So we're going to keep politics out of this. You know what we are going to do, Karl? I'm going to totally hard right you here. I'm going to completely make a big turn. And it's inspired by our conversation earlier, something that I saw on LinkedIn, your background with a really cool guitar and violin back there. And if I didn't mention already, the hat that you're wearing right now. Who comes to a podcast with a Smithereens hat, which is super cool, and I love that. I love it. But I did notice this on LinkedIn, and that you write these articles in support of the Music Museum of New England, showing New England's musical heritage. I didn't even know that existed. I think that's cool. Next time I'm up there, I'm going to go check that out. But it's something that I'd never heard of, really unique. Now, let's assume we're going to go deeper than Boston and Aerosmith, the two biggest names that I know of. What have you learned when you've been digging into that New England musical heritage?
Well, first of all, you don't have to travel to New England to enjoy the museum, because it's an online-only museum.
Excellent.
mmone.org.
Okay.
Everyone listening should check it out. Okay. Oh, yeah. So, they do include Boston and Aerosmith, as you would expect, right? But I take particular joy in writing about other artists that you might not have. They have the same name recognition, yet they've contributed to, and that's, you have to be from New England. You have to have contributed to music scene here. Like Bonnie Raitt is covered in there because she lived here for a while. Van Morrison lived here for a while, and they contributed to the music scene. But so I liken it to this podcast that I do called Unsung CX Heroes, and I like to focus on people who aren't the name people out there, because they get a lot of coverage, right? I just finished my 13th article that hasn't been published yet on Paula Cole. She's a singer, native of Rockport, Massachusetts, and she's achieved considerable fame. If you think of getting a Grammy Award for her song "Where Have All the Cowboys Gone?"
Oh, no, I knew the song as soon as you said her name.
Yeah, and she performed with Peter Gabriel. So, and I also wrote a recent article on bassist Tony Levin. You might know who he is, but he's a Massachusetts native, and he gained a lot of fame from performing with Peter Gabriel, and also the English band King Crimson.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That name was filmed, So I do a lot of research on artists when I'm writing about them, and I'd say that how that relates to CX in these terms is digging into the data to glean the insights that would make my articles more interesting.
Okay.
Help readers, the customers, and their customers, right?
Yeah.
Learn something new that they didn't already know about an artist. And that's my differentiator, if you will. Okay.
I like that.
Now, Tony is a masterful musician, but he's very humble guy. I had some email conversations with him and stuff. And I would wish that anyone in the CX profession that likes to call themselves a CX guru or CX expert would also exhibit that kind of humility as Tony does, because I think it would gain them more respect.
I know we're talking about a digital and online museum, but there's plenty of traveling that I know you've done, and there's plenty of traveling that we have done. Even just getting around New England can kind of wear you out a little bit. And just any sort of travel. And it's nice to take a break from that travel and get a little relaxation in the lounge. So let's do that now. Let's take a break. Let's join me here in the first class lounge. Let's move quickly and have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
from my past, it has to be Barbados because I've been there 5 times.
Okay.
The Caribbean island of choice right there, Barbados. Love it. Love the food. Love the people. Driving on the left side of the road is a joy and a half.
I would imagine it's particularly delightful too. You mentioned 67 degrees, but I imagine it's delightful to be in Barbados when it is the negative 12 or whatever that I remember being when I have been up there.
75 degrees year round.
Yeah, get me there for sure. What is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Been a lot of places, but the one that I have in mind right now is Iceland, believe it or not.
Okay.
So it's fairly north of here. Actually, it was when I was in the United States Air Force, I was stationed in Goose Bay, Labrador. So that's as north as I've been.
Yeah.
Lots of cold, lots of snow, but lots of northern lights up there. So I'd love to go to Iceland to kind of relive that experience without the military experience.
That would be nice. Not too far of a flight for you, actually, too. By the time you've gotten up to Boston, it's not that far to Iceland.
I think it's about a 4-hour flight.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. You're probably closer to Iceland than you are to L.A.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I'm closer to London than I am to LA.
Well, that's true. I did know that. That is true. What is a favorite thing to eat?
My favorite thing, and I can't have that every day, is raw oysters.
Oh, yeah.
I just have a palate for raw oysters. And trust me, you can't put cocktail sauce on those things. That's rule number 1. And rule number 2 is you cannot just swallow them. You've got to chew them and savor the taste of the oyster. And it's just like red wine. There's so many different ones.
That I've been surprised with, Karl. Actually, of all places, I know it's not the best, but Legal Seafood, when I was there, and I had one of their oyster platters, and I was like, I don't know what to order. She said, I'll just bring you a bunch of them. And my gosh, the difference in the flavors. This one tastes like champagne. This one has a briny flavor. This one has, it was stunning. So red wine's a great comparison.
Yeah.
Man, I'm a fan of oysters as well. Let's go the other way. What is a thing your parents forced you to eat, but you hated as a kid?
My dad always said, eat your carrots. They're good for seeing.
Right.
That's right about that. But he didn't like them. He didn't set the example. He made me and my sister eat carrots. And I couldn't stand it, but today it's one of my favorite things. I learned to like, it's kind of like learning to like snow.
Right, well, yeah, Karl, you and I are probably not on the same page there. I believe that the only use for snow is if I have 2 skis on top of it. So you and I may have different views of snow, but we do both enjoy carrots now. It is funny how our taste evolved from what they were as children. What is, thinking of travel now, what is one travel item, not including your phone, that you will not leave home without?
So that was my answer, but it can't be.
Nope.
So, well, if I'm traveling by air, there's 2 things that I need to bring with me. Can I say 2 things?
Sure.
You said 1 thing, but it's got to be 2. I need a book because that's where I get all my major reading done. So if I'm on a flight to Barbados or LA or Iceland, I'll have a book with me. But another thing I bring headphones, not because I want to listen to anything in particular, but what I want to do is prevent myself from being the recipient of the talker that's going to sit next to me.
Karl, I have done that on flights. Even if I'm not listening to something, I will just put the headphones on, and that is the protective barrier. So I'm absolutely with you there.
Yep.
Now, in the intro, I mentioned your experience in the B2B world, right? The chemistry, the complex machinery in the B2B world. Beyond that, but you've been in both B2B and B2C. What are some of the differences you've seen in customer experience specifically between those worlds?
Well, the interesting thing is I see a lot of the same things, actually.
All right.
So it isn't all that much different. I mean, in B2B, it does get more complex because the client has different faces. There's not one person usually.
Okay.
You've got an end user, you've got an economic buyer, you've got an influencer, you've got procurement, and any number of people can get involved in the acquisition or sale. As opposed to B2C, where the end user is typically the client face. That's the one client face. So I see that. But however, the concepts, though we talked about the basics, they're similar, if not identical. So everything I talked about regarding basics of CX really equally applies. In my training courses, I have students from both B2B and B2C, and they learn to apply the same concepts within their respective organizations, and they're working side by side. So sometimes they're working in teams. So, things like customer journey mapping, that's not common to B2B or B2C. It's relevant to both.
Yeah.
So many things that overlay that I don't think there isn't that much difference when you come right down to it. When it comes to the fundamental tools that you need to be successful at that, I don't think the nuances are in the way the business runs.
I like that. And Karl, it actually, I wrote a blog, gosh, I think it may have been like 2 years ago at this point. I've lost track of time, where I wrote that, B2B, each B in the B2B is just a collection of humans. So it's just, they're still humans. They still operate like humans. It's still customers. It's still, and how that translates to customer experience tends to be the same. You mentioned those training courses. And I want to close out with this, Karl, because we started our conversation with a lot of conversation about what are companies getting wrong? Right? Why don't they focus on this? Why don't they care? But there's got to be there's these triggers. And what is it that you commonly see where a company says, okay, that's it. I've got to do my customer experience, my customer service, my customer insert word here better. What are those issues, those moments that cause a company to say, I need to bring Karl in?
Well, me specifically, in my case, I think it's curiosity about CX.
Okay.
It's hearing about it. It's wanting to learn more. And hopefully they find me in their search effort. I mean, that's another, hurdle and stuff like that. But and realize that I'm the guy they want to talk to when they're at that maturity level 0. When we talk about 0 means I'm kind of barely aware of it. I'm not aware of it, but I'm going from 0 to 1. Those are ideal for me. You don't have to be a CX savvy to have a conversation with me. I'm not going to use a lot of big words and jargon on you here. And I kind of specialize that way in my approach to organizations, to get the lay of the land around CX and individuals, whether they're without an organization or within an organization, that are new to the discipline. There's so much to learn about the fundamentals. And, I'll use a music analogy here. I took drum lessons a number of years ago, and I thought, well, I'm going to walk in there with my drum kit, and the drum instructor says, no. All you need is a pair of sticks and a snare drum.
Yeah.
Because you really need to learn the fundamentals. And we started with the paradiddles and stuff like that, and the rolls and all this stuff and the beats. And it's all about stick control. And that's where I think a lot of organizations, once they understand that, then they can get all the rest of the maturity steps that they want to, because that's the only way you're going to become competent. And any drummer will tell you that. I learned that when I was did an article on Tony Williams as another drummer. Mm-hmm. And he said, what you do when you start out is you start seeing what other people are doing, watch what other people are doing, and try to do that. And I think in CX, you can do some of that. You can see what other folks are doing and try to do some of that. But there becomes a point where you make it your own. When you realize what it is for your business in CX or for your technique as drummer to craft your own way and own style, because there is not one right way. And that's probably part of the problem here is there's tons of opinions out there in CX world. In CX, tons of opinions. There's endless opinions.
Amen to that.
And I sometimes get annoyed by opinions. I just want to, but I think experimentation and, finding your own in that is real, but it takes time. And patience needs to prevail in that world.
And Karl, I think what I like is that let's close with that. There's a ton of opinions out there, but what you really were you were talking about the fundamentals, the basics. Get that right. And I didn't know any of the drum stuff that you were talking about, but just get that right. You're not going to go out there and suddenly be the drummer for Rush, right? You're going to be the kid on the little snare drum, rat-a-tat-tat. Right. And starting with those basics is so important and so smart, and probably where a lot of companies are so bloomin' wrong. How can people get in touch with you to learn more, Karl? Well,
first of all, my business is called HorizonCX.
Okay.
HORIZON. So when I say my email address is Karl@HorizonCX, invariably somebody wants to put Verizon in there.
Oh, no.
But I'm not Verizon, I'm Horizon. So think of the sun.
Yes.
My logo is the sun, the horizon. Okay. So you can email me at Karl@HorizonCX.com, or you can go to HorizonCX.com, a website. I'm on LinkedIn.
Karl, I will get all of that into the show notes. So listeners, you can just scroll down and click the links directly from there, and you'll be able to get connected and find a way to learn more about Karl and HorizonCX. Karl, again, thank you so much. It's great talking the fundamentals of CX with you. Great learning more about New England music. And I am going to go hit that museum online and learn a little bit more about that. Wonderful conversation today, Karl. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Rick. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX for CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX for CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.